I'm really excited for this one, guys, because we get the opportunity to speak to Jay Paterno, who is the son of legendary coach Joe Paterno. And Jay has a lot of experience in the football world in high pressure situations, coaching at a very high level, being around a program that was very successful, had its ups and downs, but a very well-respected program at Penn State, and just a lot of other coaching experience. And so we're going to pick his brain, learn a little bit about his experiences, a lot of the stories. He gets to share some really funny stories. We talk about the pressures of athletes today, coaches today, as compared to before. We talk about NIL and what that actually is, how it differs from school to school and like what we should expect. And, we talk about his book, Blitzed, which is the main part of this. I want you guys to check the description in the podcast, find the links there. Blitzed is his book that he just wrote, and we'll talk about what's in the book and how you can find the book. And I also pick his brain on writing the book. So a lot of cool stuff coming in this week on the Gametime Guru. So
what time is it? Game time!
This is the Gametime Guru podcast, where I interview sports figures from all over the world to help deliver a panoramic view on sports. So whether you're a former athlete, one of the crazies, or simply a casual sports fan, this is the perfect show for you as we peel back the curtains and learn from our guests every single week. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I'm helping you see sports through a different lens. What's up, everybody? Welcome out to another episode of the Gametime Guru podcast. Shane Larson here, host of the show. Excited to be here with you guys for yet another interview. We are 9 years running into this podcast, started it in 2017, and it's reached 183 countries. All 50 states. And that's thanks in large part to all of you guys who have tuned in at some point throughout the last 9 years. I'm really excited to have you guys here along for the journey and along with me, like with every piece of it. Now, what I say every single week, if you're new to the show, welcome aboard. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, but also follow me on YouTube. YouTube is one of my smallest platforms. I had just trying to build that one. The audio side, we've got it all worldwide. Everybody listening across the globe, but on the YouTube side, still have a lot of area of opportunity. So with that being said, as you guys heard in the introduction, super excited to bring on our guest today. His name is Jay Paterno. Jay, thanks for joining the show, man.
Good to be here.
It's really exciting. When I saw your name come up, I'm like, man, I absolutely would love to have Jay Paterno on the podcast. So, we're going to talk about your book. We're going to talk about some of that, but I want to get to know you. Jay is like just talking about the relationship you had, growing up with, just the family ties into the football world and just kind of I guess we'll talk about your experience in the football world. So let's dive into that a little bit. The son of a coach, right? What was that like, I guess, in a nutshell, growing up with a father like your own that was so just well-respected, just so good as a leader in the sports world? And what did you take away from that as his son?
Well, it's funny because I don't know what to compare it to because it was the only experience I had. But in all of anything you get in life, there's good and bad. And so for a lot of the good was, you got to be around something like Penn State football for so many years, to go on bowl trips, to see things that, all your friends thought were really, really cool. But on the flip side, there were a lot of times where he was on the road recruiting for 4 and 5 days in a row. And we wouldn't see him, or the amount of time that he had to spend away from us to be really a father figure to 120 guys on the team and the time demands of that. So you balance everything out with the good and the bad, but I wouldn't trade it for anything else in the world.
That's so cool, man. What leadership lessons did you carry away from your father's coaching philosophy and so forth?
Well, I think a couple things. Number one, you gotta before you take on the role of being a leader, you have to really define what it is you stand for, what are the core values that the organization you want to lead or the people you want to lead. What are those core values? Because as you go through change and as times change, as there's adversity and things like that, there's going to be challenges to what you do. But if you have those core values, you can change your tactics, but you can't really change what you stand for, because those are things that really define. He used to talk about success and excellence. And, success is something that other people define. How much money do you make? How many games do you win? All those kind of things. And that's all nice and those things. But what really matters is your personal excellence. And that comes down to those core values that you have within you.
question for you to piggyback off that too, just from a leadership perspective, Jay, is okay, you got your core values, and this could go for anybody, business owners, it could go for coaches and so forth, anybody in a leadership role. It sounds easy. You stick to your core values. When things change, the tactics can change, but the core values stick. I guess, like, is there an example from your experience in coaching and just being around, an organization like Penn State for as long as you were, and like, I guess where that happened, where adjustments needed to be made because whether the industry is changing, whether you had a bad season or an injury occurs on a team when it derails a team's trajectory, so to speak, something goes awry, and you were able to stick to your core values, or that you witnessed in all those years being around that program. Is there a specific example that you could show where the core values actually stuck with the leader that was leading that organization?
Yeah, no question. I guess, been 2000 season. During the off season, we had the guy who was going to be our starting quarterback was home in May and was wrongly accused of punching an off-duty cop, a police officer. And that is no way to disrespect police officer or anything, but he simply didn't do it. It was an off-duty police officer. And the city where he grew up, they basically made up their minds that they were going to go after him. And we knew he was wrongly accused. And there were a lot of people and Joe has always believed in the core American values of innocent until proven guilty. It believed that you stand by your players in tough times. And the media, the calls from the media, and even some people in our own university's administration was to simply kick the kid off the team, get rid of him, and cut him loose. And Joe said, look, if I've got to stand up, and we became aware of some things that related to the case in real time, that where Joe felt, and I was coaching the kid at the time, the quarterback, and Joe felt like, we have an obligation to defend him, to stand up for him in the face of all the media criticism, in the face of all the people who didn't know what they were talking about, and take a stand. And it was a black quarterback that we had, and he was accused of punching a white cop in a racial incident, and none of it was true. And it bore itself out. He was not indicted. He later won a lawsuit against the city because they found out some of the things that they knew to have happened had happened. But in that moment, it was a very difficult time because people were, as you can imagine, some of the emails and letters that I got as his coach for a guy who stood up for him publicly, as did Joe. They were pretty nasty, and some of it was just racially just horrendous, hateful, not to mention the mail he was getting and some of the things he was getting. So, we stood up to it and we did the right thing. And in my dad's notes, we found after he died, he said, if it costs us a couple of wins to stand up to a corrupt system that's trying to do something to one of our players, I'm willing to lose some games to do that. And we probably did lose a couple of games because of it. But at the end of the day, he could look himself in the mirror at the end of the season and say, I did the right thing.
And that's actually really cool. That's a really cool example because that's a real life example, stuff that's like literally happening. So thank you for sharing that. That puts a lot of pressure on a coach and like yourself and Joe. That puts a lot of pressure on you guys as leaders. I guess from someone who's been in a high pressure like organization like that, you're supposed to win, but you're dealing with the external stuff too. I guess from a leadership standpoint, what does pressure look like at the highest level, and how has it evolved since the time that you were growing up in the system and everything with your dad, just kind of like learning the game, and how has it evolved since then? How does pressure look in those high level situations?
I think it's evolved into where it's 24/7 now because of social media, because of the access that people have, and all these different forums where people who don't like the job that you're doing can find each other and kind of create these narratives about you, and whether they're true or not. I mean, there were things that were alleged to have happened in my private life, which were absolutely not true, but people repeated them enough on social media to where, I was actually asked about some of them and got to clear the record on, thankfully. But when you look at it now, you have players that are, because of NIL, they're on social media promoting products, which means fans can get at them. So you got to help them through that pressure. The money has gotten so big that the expectation levels have gone through the roof. But I grew up My dad had a listed phone number his whole life because he was always afraid that there would be a player who had a family emergency that might need to get a hold of him, and they could call him, information and get his phone number and get a hold of him. Unfortunately, after some tough games, fans could get that number
Yeah.
too as well. And there were times, 10 years old, little me picks up the phone and, hey, your dad's in blah, 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 blah. Like, Mom, what does this mean? Where did you hear that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the guy on the phone just said that dad, today's game was a cluster. I don't have to fill out the rest of the word for you, but I mean, those were part of it. But it has gotten bigger as the money's gotten bigger, as the attention's gotten bigger. Those things they've all grown exponentially.
Yeah. I can imagine, more money, more problems. There's more stuff there, and they just grow and grow and grow.
And you gotta keep a good head on your shoulder about it. When I was coaching, I would ignore most of it. I didn't pick up the newspapers, win or lose, because I didn't want to get too caught up in
Right.
the positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. And then, my dad used to tell me one of the best pieces of advice he gave me was don't get in a pissing contest with a skunk. And so anytime you go on social media, and I tell us the guys I've coached, I tell us the guys that are playing now, I tell guys that are in coaching, don't get in a pissing contest with a skunk. And all you gotta do is go on social media and you will find plenty of skunks. And if you get into a back and forth on social media, you are never going to win that. Because most of those people generally have more time on their hands than you do, and you got other stuff to do besides get into back and forth with them.
That's such a good point, because I had a question listed here that as I was at work today, I was like writing down stuff that I wanted to get to know, and I was thinking about like how coaches and players can handle the mental strain of like social media and expectations. But I think that's a part of that answer is like, just don't get in a pissing contest with a skunk. I love that. I love that. Is there any other, I guess, to go on that, like with the pressures that are added now, Jay, you just mentioned them. There's just a lot. There's money that's out there. There's NIL, and we'll get into this right now too. But like, there's just a lot of external pressures that are coming. And a lot of these players at a young age, mind you, especially the collegiate athletes, I mean, they're 18 to 22-year-old kids that are getting exposed to a lot of pressures that they might not have had before, but they're also getting exposed to a lot of money. And there's just a lot of stuff that comes with that, a lot of fame. What advice would you give them outside of that piece, how to handle that?
I don't think we talk enough about mental health, and part of the book talks about the mental health challenge. And keep in mind, the book it's nonfiction fiction, so it's a fiction book, but it's based on a lot of real stories, true stories. And some of the mental health challenges that players are facing right now are greater than they've ever been, for a number of factors. And I think that the NFL's finally has tried to make a move in that regard. And we just had the tragic suicide of the player with the Cowboys. But you look at college athletes now, you're seeing more and more incidents of attempted suicides or suicides, people that are having real mental health crises. I think that's really, really important. And you go back 30 years ago, no one talked about it. No one thought about it. You were just supposed to be this tough football player who showed up. And I credit guys like Pete Carroll. I know guys who played for Pete Carroll at the Seahawks, and they talked about Pete would check in with guys all the time. And I've gone through some things in terms of, through some of the consulting stuff I've done, have had conversations and even spent 2 weeks looking at how people train these things, life coaches, mental health, all that kind of stuff, and gotten exposed to some of the techniques and things that are involved there. So it's something that I don't think we talk enough about. I think coaches have a tendency to think they can handle everything, but I think this generation of coaches, you look at a guy like Ryan Day at Ohio State, talks about it quite a bit, and is very upfront about it, and is really committed to it. And I think that's a good sign, because as strong as we all like to think we are, it's nice to have someone to lean on every once in a while, or to talk to, who can kind of give you a more rational, calm perspective, and to get your emotions to kind of come down a little bit, because it is easy to get emotional.
Absolutely. I mean, they always say like when emotions are high, intellect is low, and like people have their emotions going all which way. It's so interesting bringing that point up though, Jay, because even at our work, I mean, I was talking to a couple of coworkers of mine, and as we, even adults, I mean, we're getting to our adult years, our 30s and our 40s, and we realize like even now, like everyone has a snapping point. There's a lot of pressures in the world, period. Like that's just what it is. And I don't think a lot of people, including myself, really know how to cope with those. And I think athletes are dealing with it at a young age now, but like even us getting older, like there's a lot there. Everyone has a snapping point, and it's important for us to get ahead of that so that you don't deal with that. But there's financial strain, there's just life strains. And, if you can get ahead of that and you learn what the resources are, and we talk about that type of stuff, you see what that does for the youth, like the young athletes, and you see what it does for people moving forward. And that's why I guess my question for you is, based on your experience, I know you mentioned Ryan Day, like Pete Carroll, like there's a lot of coaches that have implemented this. There are some programs that do focus on the mental health component, but not all of them. There's a lot of them that talk about like they have mental health coach, like have mental coaches as well as strength and conditioning coaches, but not every program is like adapted into that. Like not everybody's doing it. What is your recommendation there? Like to take mental health more seriously? Do you think the programs, these organizations should be implementing them, or should these athletes be seeking them themselves?
I think some of both. I think, there are a lot of programs that have put them in place,
Sure.
but it still takes the athlete to come and talk about it. I think coaches need to encourage that as much as they can. I mean, look, I'm going to be first to tell you, we had a sports psychologist going back 30 years when I was coaching. I was not a guy who believed in all that stuff, but as I've gotten older and wiser, it is more important than ever for people to get involved, to seek out that help. And it's one thing to have it. It's another thing for guys to utilize it, and they've got to become used to utilizing it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Now, we've referenced your book a couple of times, the book Blitzed, and I want to talk about that too, because Jay, like what's cool is you have done something that I aspire to do, and that's writing a book. I would love to write a book based on experiences, based on conversations I've had with people like yourself, just the things I've learned throughout the last 9 years of doing this podcast. And you've written a book. I think that's really cool, and you've done it more than once. And so, like, you know what you're doing on that front. So I would love to like just pick your brain on the book and what's captured in the book, because you've talked about a couple things. We've referenced the book a couple times already, but what is in the book? Like, what can we expect from this book if we were to get our hands on it?
Well, it's going to pull back the curtain on what's going on in college football right now. And it really comes from 4 years ago, I wrote a book called Hot Seat, which it was all based on my experiences in coaching and true stories. But rather than write that and talk about this school did this in recruiting and that school did that in recruiting, and having lawyers lined up to go through everything to make sure that we weren't going to get sued, and having, to protect the names of the innocent and the flat out guilty, I said, let's write this as a fictional book. I'll set it at Ohio State because I recruited that state for 17 years for Penn State and knew the state really well, knew a number of people at Ohio State, so I had a sense for what that job was like. So I said, I'm going to set this as a fictional coach at Ohio State, and I'm going to tell the stories that I would tell, and I would assign them to schools. And I made it very clear at the beginning with a disclaimer that these, where these things happen is not in any way saying they happen at that school or that school, but I could change names and that kind of thing. So I wrote that and took you through a coach who had lost to Michigan and lost a bowl game and was told by the president, we've got a bunch of trustees that want you gone and you've got 1 year to win. So it takes you through that. Now, a couple of years later, people say, well, what's it like in NIL, with all the transfer portal and the NIL and all the things now that are different than when you wrote the book. And I had been consulting on NIL for 3 or 4 years at that point. So I was, and still talking to AD, still talking to coaches, still talking to people all over the country. So all those things, I had all these stories that I knew about. I said, well, let's take those and put those in and put this coach through a year where, he got through that year, but now I've got to get to the next level. I've got to get the playoff and get deep in the playoff and do those kind of things, because now the bar has gotten raised to where the fans expect something different or more. So it takes you through what that's like. And with the transfer portal, with NIL, with so many things happening now that weren't part of the process, where agents are involved in recruiting and people are asking for money flat out, and they're allowed to at this point now.
Right.
What that all looks like and what compromises you're willing to make as a coach to kind of try and win at all costs, but also try and do the right thing with your players.
Interesting. Okay. So let's talk about this though, like as well, like talk about the NIL stuff. What's interesting. So NIL has shifted quite a bit, right, Jay? Like from the time that it started, I mean, there's so much, that's a whole world in and of itself. But like when it started, I remember talking to Lee Steinberg here on the show. We were talking about NIL, and it was Wild Wild West. And then it kind of got into the collectives, and the collectives were kind of forming at every school, and they're doing this. And then the universities now are in charge of this. And anyway, what are you seeing in regards to recruiting when it comes to like NIL? How is that shifting like in the recruiting process? Because I think the general fan doesn't realize like the impact that it has on recruiting. And I want to ask you that question, and I want to follow up with kind of my own like thought process there of like the differences between certain universities. So I want to just kind of get your answer first.
Well, when NIL started, it was essentially supposed to be, Jay Paterno is a great quarterback at school X. And there's a company that would love to put me on a cereal box, let's say Wheaties, and because they think there's a return on investment from that exposure of being associated with me. Okay, that's NIL. They come in and say, Caitlin Clark, State Farm commercial, that's NIL. Nike, that's NIL, because Nike values her at that point.
Right.
What happened with NIL was essentially synthetic NIL, where people were just saying, "Oh, well, let's pretend that this person's doing something NIL, but it's really pay to play."
Yeah.
It was you're on the team, you get a contract for X amount of dollars, and you're going to tweet twice. We're going to create this collective, and we're going to pay you to promote the collective, to raise money, to pay you to promote the collective, to raise money. And there's a point in the book where the head coach goes, "Well, wait a minute, that sounds like money laundering." And they're like, "Well, you could call it that." But essentially that's kind of what you had going on. So that was what we call synthetic NIL, not real NIL. Now with as it has evolved, now you're getting into with revenue sharing. That's your pay to play. Now schools have $16 or $16.5 million in their football budget to pay players, and now they've got to allocate that to certain people in certain ways. On top of that is NIL money, where now collectives are now kind of coming in house. A lot of corporate partners with schools. Let's say Coke is a corporate partner of school X. And now they say, well, Coke is paying us X amount of dollars a year for pouring rights or promotional rights. We're going to take $500,000 from Coke, and it might be $500,000 of the money Nike gives us, $500,000 from this company, that company, whatever. And we're going to put our players on Coca-Cola cups in the stadium, or we're going to put them on a billboard, or we're going to put them on signage. And so that's kind of your NIL money on top of the revenue sharing, which is all allowed. And that's one of the differentiators in recruiting. So now schools are really under pressure to find that NIL money because they are capped on the revenue share side right now. Now, that may all change with the next lawsuit. And that's one of the things about where we're at is, a guy who's a sophomore in high school right now, who's the best running back in the country, he wasn't part of any class action settlement with the NCAA. So they're probably going to sue at some point and say your salary cap doesn't apply to me and I want X amount of dollars. Now, I'm not naive. I also know that on top of the NIL and on top of the revenue sharing, if everybody's on a level playing field, someone will find a way with the brown paper bag of cash on top of that. So, that's, we're never going to avoid all the problems.
Right. It's so hard to navigate because it's only been 4 years ish,
Yep.
like 4.5, and it's shifted so much. Now to kind of go on to that, like, I guess, let me get your thoughts here. So it's funny because I'm an Ohio State fanatic, but I'm from Boise, Idaho. So I'm a Boise State grad, just love Ohio State because I loved Eddie George when I was a little kid. And so that was my favorite player. No, I have no ties to Ohio. But so I have two programs that I root very hard for, Boise State and Ohio State. When it comes to a football budget, they're on two different universes, essentially, as far as like what their athletic budget is versus this. Now, what we're seeing at Boise State, Dirk Cutter, who was an offensive coordinator for Boise State last year, former NFL football coach, came back to Boise State to be an offensive coordinator for a year and help out over there. He mentioned to the media in Boise, Idaho, that we were behind the game with NIL. And what we're seeing is like the revenue sharing is mainly for the people that are on the roster, like right now trying to maintain, like to retain. The recruiting, we don't have a lot to recruit with because we're trying to keep the people that are already there. we hear from Ohio State last year, oh, $20 million budget. They paid $20 million for the roster. And they come back and rebuttal it with, well, it was the majority of that was to keep the players that were already there. They got Caleb Downs and Will Howard, but it was like the rest of it was to keep the players that were already there. I don't know what's true. I guess my question is here, like, how much of this money is actually going for recruiting to bring people in versus how much is actually being just to like, oh, let's take care of the people that are here and retain them?
That's hard. It's hard to know that because not everybody's real transparent about what they do. But you really have two operations. You have one to retain the guys that you have and keep them from jumping. Because once you put, one of the things I think that where this has to land is going to be collective bargaining. I mean, there's going to have to be a settlement or a arrangement where there's collective bargaining, so that I know that if I bring a guy into Boise State and I sign him for 2 or 3 years, that he's going to be there for 2 or 3 years. And we're not going to have him jump. Because what's happening is right now is a lot of the schools at the top of the pecking order, so to speak, with the money, they're rating, they're getting established players in college. So they'll go to a Boise State and grab a kid. They'll go to Tulane and grab a kid, or whatever it may be, a non-Power 4 conference team, and grab those guys. And now, on the flip side, that means they're taking less high school players. So you're going to see a lot more really, really good high school players end up sliding down the pecking order, so to speak, and end up at some schools where they might not have been before, because so many of these schools are so concerned with grabbing the guy right now, grabbing 8 or 10 guys in the portal now rather than signing high school kids because they need them now. Now, at the end of the day, we'll see what that means. But I think that, it's going to be more imperative that schools like Boise State, as they bring kids in from high school, find ways to keep them, because the temptation, you look at a guy like Ashton Genty. I mean, hats off to that guy for staying at Boise State the whole time, because I'm sure he had some things thrown his way. And it's nice to see a loyal guy like that and have it pay off for both Boise State and for him. And I hope that becomes more the norm rather than the exception.
Totally. No, it totally makes sense. Do you think it will impact, like, I coach basketball, and a lot of our kids here go to junior colleges first. We don't have a ton of D1 talent that I've coached, but they go to junior colleges first. And we're talking about the junior college landscape with the new shift in rule and like just discussions of like, whether it will count towards, eligibility and not. Like, do you see the high school kids now going more to the junior college route first simply because of that, because they know that they need to develop, and these big universities are going to be looking at the transfer portal first? Anyway, do you think him back to junior college, like transition phase?
I don't think we'll know what that's going to look like for a while yet. I think that, you come to a place like Pennsylvania, the kids in Philly that are coming out in basketball right now, a lot of them have had NIL deals for 2 or 3 years. So it's just the way it is. I mean, Pennsylvania allows high school kids to do it. And, not that I agree with it, but it's probably a wise decision if you want to avoid litigation. So you're seeing that. So I think it'll be curious to see how that goes. And I think the decision is, going to be to allow kids, it doesn't count. If they're not in the NCAA, it shouldn't count towards their eligibility. I agree with that, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how the NCAA, there's a movement now that, we'll go to 5 years of eligibility NCAA. There are lawsuits. There's going to be lawsuits now from guys that are going to head into their 6th year that maybe aren't good enough to get the NBA. And they can make more money from NIL staying at the school they're at, as opposed to going and playing in Europe. And now they say, as long as I'm a student, I can stay in grad school for as long as I want. And if I'm making $1 million to play basketball at an SEC school, and I won't make that over in Europe, who are you to tell me I can't play anymore? So we really need a constitutional convention, for lack of a better term, where leaders, I'm on the board of trustees at Penn State, to presidents, to athletic directors, coaches, players, administrators, all get representatives of all those levels and get in and say, look, let's find a framework for the future of college athletics, and then go to the people in DC and say, we need you to enshrine this in law so that we're safe from litigation. We need something like that. I think until we do that, it's going to continually be up in the air.
Interesting. So, another question that comes up, and I'm referencing like the book, because the book, from what I understand, I'm getting my copy here soon, but like the book is exploring athletes and coaches, like the issues that both are experiencing right now. And I wanted to talk about the coaching side as well as just the athlete, not just athletes, but coaches too. So right now, big talk. I mean, Penn State, right? James Franklin. We had that discussion. Then you had, Brian Kelly. There's big names. The pressures of performing like now, and these coaches have big contracts. There's buyouts that have to occur. Like there's a lot of things, and you're experiencing it. Coaches have, it seems, at least from the outside perspective, Jay, that they have a shorter leash, so to speak. And I don't know if that, like, how you see it as a coach yourself, to somebody who's been in that world and the son of a legend, being in that world and the pressures that they face. Like, do you feel like there is a shorter leash for coaches, or is that just a perception that's just a misperception? Like it's a misunderstanding. And I guess, what do you see going forward? Do you see that it's going to be harder for schools to land coaches? Are coaches going to be a little bit pickier on the jobs that they choose? And are we going to see less coaches bouncing, like, Nebraska and Matt Rule, like seeing guys like him that are staying there because they're actually kind of worried about going to the wrong place because of the leashes that they have? I don't know if that's making sense, but I'm just wondering what your thoughts are.
You're 100% right. I think because the money's gotten so big, the expectation levels go through the roof, because people are, hey, this guy makes 8.5, this guy makes $9 million, and he can't beat these teams. One of the criticisms of James Franklin was he couldn't, quote unquote, couldn't get over the hump. Well, what's the hump? Because if the hump's the national championship, there's only 3 active coaches right now that have gotten over the hump. And so you're putting an unrealistic expectation on somebody when that's your only acceptable goal. I think you got to define what you are as a program. What do you stand for? And you do everything you can to get your kids in the education that they should be getting, compete for a championship in your conference, compete for a national championship, and then develop them for the pros. And you should do it in that order. And the reality is what Nick Saban did at Alabama, that is a tremendous, ridiculous outlier. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And if there was not a playoff, he wouldn't have as many. And not to this is no way disrespect him, but if there were not a 4-team playoff, he wouldn't have the number of championships that he's had. You go back, before the playoff, if you weren't one of the top 2 teams, you were out. And I can tell you, 1968, 1969, 1973, 1994, Penn State was undefeated. Didn't have a chance to play for because they were sitting at number 3. 2005, we had a great football team, but we were sitting at number 3. There's been a number of those years at Penn State that, how many championships would Penn State have won if we had a playoff? But that's, you can't do anything about it. But the point is people's expectation has gone, it's totally askew. And I think the leases are shorter, the anger has grown, because not only do we see the big money that the players are making and the coaches are making, but a lot more fans are more, quote, invested in the games, if you know what I'm getting at, because they're on DraftKings or FanDuel or whatever. And I've got $300 on Penn State to cover. Oh, we won, but they didn't cover. Damn, I hate these guys, that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, so that in that way, the leash is shorter. I don't think it's good. I think coaches now are starting to say, well, I'm making a lot of money here. My family likes it here. I like where I live. Why jump for an extra $1 million when I'm making 8.5 or 9? I think coaches are starting to look at things beyond just the total dollar amount, because they're making so much money. It's not like they're going from the poorhouse, they're in the poorhouse. And I think the other thing about the expectations is what I think we'll now call for the foreseeable future, the Cignetti effect. When you look at how quickly he got to Indiana, how quickly he was able to put a roster together. Now, people don't realize a lot of those kids came with him from JMU, as did 7 of his assistants, of his 11 main assistants. So he had a lot of continuity when he got to the league and was able to be successful there. So all those things kind of play into it. But, Kurt Cignetti was on everybody's list, and he signed an extension in Indiana because he likes where he is and he likes being able to do what he can do there. Matt Rule, no different. Matt Rule likes being in Nebraska, thinks he can accomplish great things. And they probably feel that, they're going to give him the time to get where he needs to get. And I think that's wise on their part.
I agree with you, man. It's so insightful. As a Buckeyes fan, I'll be completely honest with you. I get really frustrated, even last year, because something you said there, Jay, was, what is the hump? Is it a national championship? Because come on now, like only one team can win it every year. Like if we're expecting to go undefeated or the whole fan base was going after him. Couldn't beat Michigan, 4 straight losses. Okay. Yeah, that sucks. It's not ideal. Right. But it's also not the
Now,
end of
I
the world.
keep telling people, especially Michigan people, I said, you ducked Ohio State in 2020.
That's facts. I know.
They ducked them. Let's just call it what it is. They went, you know what? We're done with the season. But anyway.
I love that you said it. Thank you, man. That's awesome. But I just felt like, that fan bases are irrational now. It just feels like, dude, come on. And he ended up getting him to a national championship last year. Historic run for Ohio State. Really cool for fans. But it was funny for me, Jay, to see the switch up within just about a month. From 1 month to the next month, it was like, oh, you were just telling me that you need to be fired yesterday, and now we just love Ryan Day because he won a national championship. And I'm not saying I'm this great person because I was a ride or die with him. I didn't care. Yeah. I was like, dude, he's a great coach. He's developed these and I thought he was really good for the mental health component and more. It's a little deeper than football with him, and so I really appreciate that about him. But yeah, it's just I just thought it was crazy with Ryan Day, and he won a national championship, and then you got James Franklin, you got all these, and a couple things that I'll agree on too on that is you mentioned just fans more invested. I'll tell you what. The whole gambling component's a whole nother story in and of itself, but I do think it does make people irrational. It makes people crazy when they put money on the line for things and people start talking crazy when their money is messed with. And it's just it's unfortunate that that's the case, but that's where we're at right now.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story about gambling. So 1985, I'm a senior in high school and I'm working in Penn State's press box doing stats. Okay. So Penn State, they were beating, I think it was Temple and Temple had a good team that year. They had a running back named Paul Palmer. It was really good. But anyway, so Penn State's up 9 and they're driving to run the clock out. They get first and goal at the 5 and now they can just take a knee. So they take a knee 3 times. Crowd boos like crazy. And I'm up in the box and my dad never talked about point spreads. I never did. And a couple of the guys writing that were writers were like, oh man, the spread was 10.5 or 11, right? So my dad and I are walking home after the game and he goes, what was all that booing about? And I said, well, I learned up in the press box that the spread was 10 or 11 or whatever it was. And you took a knee. So the gamblers were all booing you because they wanted you to score and cover the spread. And he goes, if anybody's that dumb enough to bet on a bunch of college kids, they deserve what they get. And he said, on top of that, he goes, Temple played really well, and they deserve to have a score that reflected how close the game really was. And, those two things always stuck with me. But I understood from that moment that, the minute somebody puts $2 on a game, they're invested in that, and you know what? It's probably, and I don't say this I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but in terms of fan viewership of college football, it's probably been a net positive in terms of number of people watching because they'll watch Tuesday night MAC games if they've got money on it because somebody told them that, Ohio U is a lock against, Miami of Ohio, whatever it may be. But so when you look at viewership of some of the bigger games, it's gone up. And I think that has a lot to do with it. It doesn't. I don't like it that way, and I am not a big. I don't gamble on anything. Never have, never will. Just because, I used to play blackjack in Atlantic City every once in a while. I'd sit at the $5 table and sweat every chip, and I would never put more than one chip on the table. But but that's me. But I'm aware of where it's all going right now.
No, that's such an awesome story. By the way, I appreciate you sharing that. I had a conversation with a guy named Matt Boyer about a month ago. Matt Boyer is the sports bookie for Shohei Ohtani, who ended up going to prison for. So Matt Boyer interviewed with me 10 days before he went to prison just last month and just kind of shared his story and was open and honest about stuff. And we were talking about that. I'm like, dude, I stopped gambling about 8 years ago on sports, and I realized, man, I was irrational too, Jay. I couldn't even cheer for Boise State because I didn't beat them by enough. I'd be like, dude, I can't even be excited about a win. And so, all that same story is that
when your team's winning, you're not happy. That's not a place you want to be.
No, not at all, not at all. Well, Jay, as we wrap up the interview and just get to, getting to know all your insights and wisdom and the stories. I kind of want to know, like, just from your experience, being around the game, do you have a favorite memory? Is that the favorite memory, or do you have a favorite memory from your time, being around, like, under your dad and in that organization, the program, and being with Penn State? Like, is there a favorite memory that you have from your coaching experience?
I don't know there's any one that is better than all of them. Certainly my freshman year on the team, we beat Miami for the national championship, which was just an epic game. Being part of that and seeing that will always stay with me. We went through a season in 2004. We weren't very good. At the end of the year, with 2 games to go, Joe kind of came in and talked to the team about, hey, we can't play for certain things this year. We haven't had the kind of season we wanted, but let's finish out the season the right way and set the stage to make a run for the national championship next year. And everybody would have thought at that point that anybody would suggest that we would even be in the hunt, we were out of our minds. And, we won the last 2 games, and we went 11-1 the next year and finished number 3. And we were picked 10th in the Big Ten out of 11. So, I mean, those kind of things always stay with you. I think, if I could go back and do any one thing coaching, okay, if someone said to me, you die, you get to go to heaven, and you get to do one thing in coaching up there, it would be on the headsets, minute 30 to go, 1 timeout, down 4, so we can't cop out and go to overtime. And with the ball around 20. I mean, those are the things I live for. That was the most satisfaction when you could get from a point where it did, or a big comeback, 21, we had a couple of 21-point comebacks when I coached. And when those things happen and you're part of it, the reaction and the feeling you get and the adrenaline rush after that is more than anything you can imagine. I mean, my dad's 400th win, we're down 21-0 in the first half to Northwestern, and we'd moved the ball, but we hadn't really scored, and there was less. We got the ball back with 52 seconds to go on our own 9-yard line before the half. And I said to the guy on the side, coach on the sideline, said, ask Joe if he wants us to get in a 2-minute. Like, let's run a draw if we get a first down, get in a 2-minute. And he said, well, why not? Everything else you've called has worked so far, so let's go. And and he was being funny, but it was. So we run the draw, we get a first down, we score, we go 92 yards in 40-something seconds and make it 21-7. We score the next 4 possessions and we win the game 35-21. But those are the things that stick with you are the comebacks like that, and coming back from adversity. The story I told you about the player we stood by who had gotten accused of some things. I mean, there's been things like that. There's just so many great memories of being part of it.
So cool, dude. For me, like a 37-year-old who's like, hey, grew up kind of like in my youth years, just kind of like following this stuff, and then just becoming like I don't know, I'm a fanatic of just history too. Yeah. It's really surreal to me talking to you, Jay, because it's bringing back stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, it's like I nerd out about this. It's so cool, dude. So if somebody wants to read your book, they want to purchase Blitzed, where can they find it?
Yeah, the bookstores, Amazon is always, Amazon, you can get it in 2 days. I mean, like, I don't even know how that whole business model works. It's like, at some point, it's like you expect somebody, but Amazon, my website, jvpaterno.com, Jay, the letter V, paterno.com. And I'm on Twitter, or what do we call it now? X, at Jay Paterno, Instagram at jvpaterno. So all those different outlets, you can get a hold of me or see what I'm up to. But Amazon and jvpaterno.com, probably the quickest way to get the books.
Awesome. Okay, so for those listening to this podcast right now, make sure to check the links in the description. I have them linked in there. If you guys haven't already read the description of the podcast, go get yourselves a copy of the book. And from myself as an aspiring author, somebody who wants to write a book with experiences, like I said earlier, how long did it take you to write Blitzed and the other books too? I guess, like, what's the process for you, Jay?
It depends. I think I am a stream of consciousness writer. So there are days when there's nothing in there, and there are days where I just can't turn it off, and I get it down and then edit it. It's hard to I should have done this at some point, but with all 3 books that I've written, I never really marked the beginning point and the end point. So I never have a definitive answer of how long it took. And I think every book is different because some things flow. When I first did Hot Seat, The number of different iterations and outlines changed almost daily. But I knew there were things I wanted to get down on paper, on a screen. I wanted to get down and written. So I wrote. And then I turned around and said, this fits here, this fits there. With Blitzed, I had more of I'm going to take them through a year where, the season just ended and going through the winter conditioning. And I arranged it by seasons almost.
Yeah.
As opposed to what I'd done earlier. When I wrote the book about my dad, that had number of different iterations. And my agent really kind of helped me wade through all that as well after my dad had died. So, I mean, it was, every book is different, every project, but the most important thing is, you gotta get it out of you onto the computer or onto paper, whatever it is. And then you got to then start to hack down, because you're always going to put down more than you need, and you got to keep it linear and make sure that everything you're writing. And this is really a thing. Stephen King. I saw Stephen King talking about writing. You want to make sure everything you're putting there, by and large, is advancing the story to where you want to get it to, because it's easy to get off on tangents and throw in extraneous stuff.
Totally, man. That is so cool. And I really appreciate you breaking that down for me. And hey, who knows, maybe I'll have to reach out to you one day when I'm finishing mine up, and just maybe let you know that it's done, so that like, hey, I took your advice, I got it done.
Get after it. I mean, when I was writing Hot Seat, finally a guy I know who'd written 25 books said to me, just write the damn thing.
Dude, I love it.
And that's what I did. It was during COVID, and I wrote it and got it done. I was like, wow, this, so. Now I'm not wishing for another pandemic so you can get your book done, but but it didn't make it easy when I couldn't go anywhere.
Right. No, I feel you.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it, Jay. I really appreciate your time and your willingness to share your insights and wisdom. Again, I would encourage all the listeners to make sure to check out the book. Go to the links that are in the description and check it out. But Jay, just want to say thank you one more time for joining the show.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, sir. For those who are listening, make sure to subscribe to the podcast. We'll be coming to you next week with another interview. Take care. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of my show. Now, if you could go and do me a favor, head over to iTunes, give me 5 stars, and leave me a review. It would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your support.